Hello, everyone. We thought, we started a bit early because we see there's about 26 participants in the room, and this is a Zoom meeting, not webinar. So if you feel like to say hello to others, you can. So welcome to the day 3 of APNIC 51 Apricot Conference. My name is Sunny, and I will be the chair assist. The chair for this routing security SIG is Aftab Siddiqui, and the co-chairs are Dima and Rupesh Shrestha. Now, before I hand over to them to follow through the agenda, let me just remind you, everyone, of the housekeeping notes. First of all, as with all APNIC conferences, please be mindful of the code of conduct, and you will see that popping up in the chat as well as for your reference, and it's published on the website too. Now, if you have any questions about anything not related to the presentations or anything related to the Zoom or technical difficulties, please post them in the chat, and my colleagues will try to help you with those. Now, during the Q&A, I believe Aftab will let you know how he will take the questions. So I'll leave that part. Let him suggest, the best possible way how he wants to handle the Q&As and comments. So with that one, I'll hand over to Aftab to proceed with the agenda. Thank you, Aftab.
Thank you, Sunny. Thank you, everyone, for joining the call. Sorry, just popped up a message saying, all right, that's good. Thank you, everyone, for joining the call. This is the Routing Security SIG, the virtual edition, yet another one. Hopefully next time, I'm not sure we'll be doing a face-to-face, but at least by the next year, we should be in one room facing each other. With the help of my co-chairs, Dima and Rupesh Shrestha, we have organized a small program. And of course, with the help of our guest, who will be speaking very shortly. First of all, without any further ado, I would say we have George Michelson on the agenda. We have Taiji Kamura-san from APNIC, and we have, of course, Dr. Dima as well. Housekeeping, as Sunny mentioned, if you have any question, just pop it in the chat, or if you want to speak, I would request you to raise your hand from the app, or if you just type hand in the chat, it should be okay as well. So that we can keep a queue and maintain the queue in the orderly fashion, just like we used to do it on the open mic. So let's start with GGM. GGM, you have a quick APNIC RPK report to share first?
Yes, I do. I'll just share my screen.
Absolutely.
Can you see this okay, Aftab?
I can.
Great. Hi, everyone. This is my status report on RPKI to everyone interested in routing security. You guys are actually kind of the boss of me. You're important because a lot of the definitions of behavior around this system are about what the holders of address resources want from routing security services, from RPKI as a signing technology. So I want to do this because I'm really motivated for you to give me feedback on our service, things we need to do, things that need to change. So, as of the 1st of March, I'm going to give you a summary of this information. The amount of ROA delegations in use, the coverage by economy in our region, some information about the NIRs, some usage information, and specifically a status report on AS0, because that was an action that was driven from policy in APNIC, and formally AS0 reporting has now been given to this SIG as a deliverable. So, active ROAs. We have somewhere around 10,000 direct members of APNIC and around 10,500 indirect members under the NIR. And what you can see here is that approximately 24% of the totality of this space are now actively creating and maintaining ROAs. I think that's really very good for the lifetime of this system, but it does show we have a really long way to go in lifting coverage of the creation of ROAs to protect assets in our region. Slightly higher in the direct membership, and there may be reasons for that we can explore, but I would say they're broadly comparable. So if we look at percentage of covering, this is based on a simple metric where I take all of the addresses in the ROA and I do the maximal aggregation so that I can then convert that from a prefix size to a host count and count instances, and do the same from the delegation files by the declared economy. And if I do the difference between these two, or the percentage calculation, I get nice simple figures for how much of our space is protected. And the big picture number is 20% of V4 is currently being protected against delegation state. Now that is not the same as what is visible in BGP. That's a statement from what has been given out. It's slightly less in IPv6, which I actually find surprising. There's less fragmentation in 6, and I expected more of it in relative terms would be protected. But nonetheless, these are the figures I see. So here is a breakdown by economy for both V4 and V6. And if you look at this, you can see that we have some economies in our region. There are 56 in our region. Some of them have absolutely amazing coverage numbers. You know, Bhutan at 99%, Pakistan at 96%. These are phenomenal numbers. They're really, really encouraging. And they're a strong sign that these are communities that have come together in the local NOG and operations context, or maybe in a hackathon or a deployathon, maybe under the aegis of an NIR like TW, where it's at 93%. And they've created a huge consistent state within that economy of ROA coverage. The problem is that by population, these are relatively low. So if you go down the rankings into the second column and look towards the bottom, well, actually at the bottom, you'll see India is sitting on 50%, which is still admirable and is streets ahead of the average for the total region, but it is a decline. And if you continue on and you look through, you'll see that we see China at a very low percentage, 2%. And given India and China are two of the largest population economies and largest address holders, taking into account Australia, who is also only on 28%, you can see why by volume of addresses, the aggregate number has come down. So, NIRs. We have 4 NIRs that are operating RPKI inside their own systems: CNNIC, IDNIC, JPNIC, and TWNIC. The 3 other NIRs, IRIN, KRNIC, and VNNIC, operate in APNIC's hosted service. And the critical message here is that all of the NIRs, and by inference, all NIR members, should be able to get a ROA if you need to. The problem is, for some of you, it's an indirect method. You're relying on the NIR to do the work for you, rather than using a system embedded in them and a portal in them. However, if you look at the percentage numbers, you'll see that by no means are all of the high hitters, the heavy hitters here, running their own RPKI. India is using our systems, but are at 50%. So it's not necessarily the case that a low number is a function of not having direct access. We do hope to see more self-hosted RPKI over time, but the critical story is everyone has coverage. So, to continue, usage. We have seen somewhere around 1,000 ASNs reading our data on a regular basis. Interestingly, these split into 2 separate, slightly different communities. They overlap, but they're not identical. Some are fetching on the web and some are fetching via rsync. Nonetheless, about 1,000 ASNs are reading our data on a regular, consistent basis. If you're interested in the statistics behind this, Geoff Huston has a measurement activity in stats.labs.apnic.net, which shows the impact on BGP in great detail. And I think that's very informative on what is actually happening to the state of global routing as a function of reading this data. Self-hosting. we now have 5 clients who are operating self-hosted RPKI using the provisioning protocol. One of these is Labs that is doing a beaconing system, but the other 4 are providers who we have shown are actually connected to more than one RIR. Now, this is absolutely wonderful. It means that we are providing in the provisioning protocol a single, consistent protocol API boundary, and it's fully operational, and it's operational across the entire ecology of the RIR system. This is going to permit people to look at using mechanisms like RTA or RSC, the 2 competing proposals for signing provisioning statements or arbitrary declarations to get digital signatures. And this means people like Amazon can look at doing BYO or other provisioning work using RPKI for the entire address space under all the RIRs. We actually sponsored development of some code in Krill, but there is work available from other people to support this. So how are people getting the data? This is a breakdown of the different clients that we see using our system. The vast majority, over half, are using the RIPE validator. We see 2 distinct variants of Routinator that form almost the rest, and then it's followed by Cloudflare, Fort, and all the other validation code bases. Now, this is actually quite concerning. And the reason is that the RIPE validator is going to be deprecated for support in this year. So it is vitally important that the operations community selects another validator. And I've included here a link to a really well curated and maintained document which lists all of the choices of relying party code that you can use to decide what you're going to do. So to AS0. We still have somewhere around 69,000 distinct prefixes that we tag origin AS0. This number varies every day because it's varying against allocations and assignments and returns. In usage terms, we see significantly less unique ASs, really only about 300, and less addresses, only 1,200 that consistently fetch. And we think there may be something going on here because when we look in rsync, you know there are 2 protocols, there's RRDP and rsync. When we look in rsync, there are actually only 35 ASNs with about 100 unique IPs. So the reason we're not sure if that is the number of people who are regularly reading is that because AS0 is fully deployed in the cloud, there is the possibility that the cloud delivery, which can localize to a point of presence much closer in web protocol, is giving such a drastically better RTT, it's altering the dynamic and we no longer see equity between the 2 protocols. Whereas for mainline RPKI that's delivered from here, where I am, there's pretty much equity in terms of the RTT on average to fetch the data. So I have a little more work to do to give you information on usage of AS0, but at this stage, I think I would be saying it's less. So what are we actually planning on doing? Well, there's been a significant concern raised in the community at large, and it's been reflected on by APNIC EC that we need to make clearer statements about making RPKI a strong service. Most of what APNIC does is in the background against ISPs making routing and forwarding decisions. RPKI has an almost immediate effect on the state of global BGP, and it's become much more important that this service is correct and is available all the time. So for this year, we have a revision of the CPS that I think I may be talking about later with Aftab. That's planned for release in this quarter with full publication towards the middle of the year, and I expect to be speaking about this at APNIC 52. We have re-engineering works on our platform. The code base is quite good, but we would like to do some work to make it more resilient against a rise in potential threats and in changes on practice in terms of software engineering. There's quite a lot of work to do there, but we're comfortable that can be done in the second half of this year. We're constructing better monitoring systems. We have Nagios and Sensu that we've had for a long time, and alerts from RPKI are sent to these systems, but we would like to improve that monitoring, and that's partly because of something that's in the under consideration section that I'll talk about later. And we're also hoping to use the experience from AS0 and improve our publication systems to take advantage of the cloud. This year, in parallel with all this work internally, we have also continued our community benefit funding, and we have decided to fund work in the Krill system to support the TA function and use of a hardware security module. We think that this will be beneficial to anyone who is looking at self-hosting, because you can protect your keying material for the protocol exchange with your parent, and to give us an assurance that in future, if we need to move software platform, we have an industry-supported SLA-capable product that we can consider using. So for next year, we're thinking about other forms of hardening, redundancy improvements, routing improvements we can do to make our TA absolutely bulletproof. And we're looking at a suggestion Job Snyders has made in the RIPE and ARING community to implement RFC-aligned certificate transparency. This is a formalism where when you produce a new certificate, you add it to a signed ledger that means there's an audit trail of all the changes you have made in that certificate. But alongside that, Job is suggesting there should be more oversight of the changes and the nature of our operating platform. And I want to proffer to you, the Routing Security SIG, this may be a formalism that you should adopt. Perhaps you should become the public oversight body that I make a regular report to about how our services are running. So these are the kinds of things that potentially would include aspects of our improved monitoring improvements. Because once we have a data flow using Prometheus, we should be able to give you figures on availability and uptime and transition states and client counts in a more structured form. The last thing we're thinking about doing is more a function of the duty and life cycle of having an HSM. You have to replace this hardware to keep current, and you can't skip generations because as technology changes, suppliers don't like you to leapfrog over an intervening generation. We want to use the next generational change that we believe happens in 2022, maybe 2023, to look at taking our current TA and making it potentially a dual redundant deployment. It could be cloud, or it could be in two offline systems we have control of, but we're looking at the additional complexity to support some kind of redundancy in this system. And we're going to bring that proposal into view, but that's for next year. So that's the end of my standing report, and I'd welcome questions. I'm happy to give you any answers I can. Thank you.
Thank you, George, for such a detailed report. I mean, this is very good, and you've been doing it for now a couple of events now. So it's amazing to see how this is shaping up for the operators community and for the membership as well. If anybody has any specific question about this presentation, then you can ask. Otherwise, we'll be heading into a more Q&A style discussion with GGM, and also taking on board Taiji-san as well, just to have an overview from the one of the NIR as well. So if I don't see any raised hands, so I'll just go straight away into the, come on, Geoff. Yes, please go ahead. Geoff?
The host would like me to unmute. We're having a bit of mucking around here between the host and the session, but okay, off we go. Certificate transparency. In the PKI web, certificate transparency seems like something that's even worse than a merely palliative action. All it does is assist in some ways the post-mortem to know that someone was mucking around, and does absolutely nothing to protect the certificates that were issued. If CAs get corrupted, it's all over in minutes. It doesn't matter that certificate transparency did or did not take place long after the event. And so I kind of wonder why repeating the mistakes of the web PKI is considered obligatory for the RPKI. what's the thinking behind this other than mere vapid imitation? Where's the thought process that justifies this as being a good thing?
Well, I think it's true that it's more in the nature of the audit. The nature of a ledger is to be able to do the analysis of what was seen to happen, and it becomes part of the root cause analysis statements. When was a thing done that shouldn't have been done? Where's the evidence of intent behind the thing that your CT process declared was done? So I absolutely agree with you, Geoff. It has more benefit as an after the event analytical component. It doesn't have a quality that is defensive of the future states, and so it has lower benefit compared to general hardening the walls around the system. And in that analysis, and we've certainly had the conversation inside the registry team, there is an argument that says this is potentially high cost, we have to develop things, and it's potentially low value, it's only useful in a disastrous situation as an analytical tool. What if we spent the time doing other things? So it's a fully legitimate question, Geoff. I wouldn't use the language you did to describe the nature of the proposals that have been made in substance to other RIRs. We have a watching brief on these proposals, and there is an element in this which is, I think I would say, reactive. If we see community-driven goals being implemented in the other RIRs, there's a potentially lemming-like quality that we say, should we do the same thing? But I pose it as a question. It's not a declaration of intent, it's a question.
Let me pose this as an observation, George. I really don't care how much time you do or do not spend on this stuff. Time and effort is not the issue. I worry about the amount of adornment and moving parts being added to this system. I worry about fragility when adornment creates more things that can go unnecessarily wrong. And my analysis tends to suggest this stuff is complex. This stuff is difficult. Certificates, key management, and so on is a new thing for most of us. And quite frankly, our tools aren't up to it. We are learning. So why are we adding to the burden and adding to the adornment so early on is really my question. So like I said, I'm not protecting your hours. I don't care if you slave till midnight, slave away, George.
I'd say I would say early on is debatable because our RPKI system is now 10 to 12 years old. But I would also say the same analytics might have to be applied to dual redundant HSM. If you run two systems which are innately designed to be integrally unique and private, that implies some communication between them to keep them synchronized. That's complexity. So although availability says have two of them, complexity just went up. And I could apply the same logic to say, don't do this.
So I'm going to just jump in, Geoff, for
move on. I've said my
no. I'm going to add one thing is that I totally agree with your point, but the issue for the operators community is we can't get away with X.509 or the PKI framework, right? We have to live in this one. And we have to find a middle ground where there is an additional benefit for the operators to see how things are working. And if there is a problem, they know there was a problem rather than being notified after 12 hours. So I think this is where this is all coming in from. Yes, it doesn't protect us from anything, but it gives you at least a window to see what went wrong.
But there are many ways of logging this stuff. Certificate transparency actually says that I get a receipt, I put the receipt back inside the certificate. It's one more step inside publication. It has nothing to do with third-party observation. That was always possible. The whole reason why this was put inside the web PKI is that they're throwing up their hands in defeat of trying to make all of the trusted CAs actually trustable, right? They tend to lie because of various issues, including money and poor systems. Now, it's not a very good answer. Indeed, it's a really lousy answer to stop CAs lying. And it doesn't add to the transparency of the situation. The NOMA, certificate transparency, is actually a misnomer. The transparency log operator doesn't check to see if the certificate that is being logged is good, bad, or indifferent. It just logs it. And so to some ways, there is nothing added other than one more step and one more piece of complexity. The almost political considerations inside the CAB forum that motivated this to be seen to be doing something because the situation in the PKI is so dismal is not something we have in the RPKI. And so I'm kind of wondering why replicating the mistakes of the PKI and the RPKI and adding more features, adding more things that could go wrong makes a better system or a worse system. And I think fragility is something we should avoid, and adding adornments without understanding why is always something we should question.
Okay, so just to add, I mean, from the routing security 6 point of view, we are not suggesting to implement the what the RFC says about the certificate transparency. We would like to have a transparent. We like to have a transparent system rather than implementing the.
And there I agree. We would like to have a system that's transparent,
yes,
auditable, and trackable. Absolutely.
Yep, that's what we from the SIG side. This is what our point of view
certificate,
is. Following the gist of the RFC, which says do this.
Certificate transparency, which is a particular thing in the context of a PKI, says something almost different to that. And that's the bit that I picked up in George's presentation here going, well, that's a good thing because, and it's kind of, well, yes and no. Transparency of operations is a really good thing and necessary. Absolutely. Is the CT model of logging the right way of doing it? Yeah.
I would welcome having this debate continue in the mailing list and getting good community convergence here. And I think it would be important you take this to RIPE and ARIN, because if it's stupid in our domains, it's equally stupid in theirs. So I think we should avoid pointless work and we should avoid stupid work. The background drive, be visibly committed to declaring what you do and being able to explain it. That's something I want to do. I saw CT as providing that benefit. You've made a strong case. It probably doesn't do what I think it does. I'm going to reflect on that. But the background goal, implement processes to give better audit and transparency, I think we keep that.
Okay, so that's an ongoing discussion, I would say. I have one hand from Dima, and then I'll move along with these set questions.
Hi, George. I have a quick, you know, we have been talking about AS0 for a time, and some people think we should have a separate trust anchor to sign AS0 for the community. Do you think it's a good idea to use RTA mechanism to sign ESO via SLAM specified by IFC 8416 to distribute AS0 assertion?
I'm going to be cautious in my reply. I don't personally like SLAM as a mechanism for distribution of intent in routing. I see it as a mechanism that's used inside an IGP to flag things that the operator who is managing that ROV VRP instance has to say, these are the things that are my lifeline. I must not ever invalidate them. This use of saying the RIR is signing a SLAM file to declare things that should not be seen, I find a little strange. But you should understand there is a context. I actually think AS0 is a little strange. I would not personally have launched this service. I think that it's a difficult place for an RIR to be, and our history of engagement in declaring things valid or invalid, actively affecting BGP, has been a very thorny topic over the years. So you're asking something that has two answers, neither of which I think will help you, because I don't like the use of SLAM. I think it's the wrong fit to use it to make declarations. You cannot perform a validity check on the signature in the same sense a ROA's validity can be checked against the signing certificate. And I'm not sure I like the idea of AS0. This was implemented because a strict policy obligation was placed on us. It's not something I personally think it is rational for a registry to do.
Good, thank you for that. So now I'm going to the certain agenda question I have raised on the agenda. number one towards you, George, is the certificate validity. Once I create,
Sure.
being a member, once I create a ROA, the validity of my ROA is different for every ROA, and it is different from one RIR to another RIR. What is the science behind that, at least from the APNIC point of view?
So the thing you need to understand is that there are multiple qualities that are defining the bounded lifetime of a signed object. The object may have validity dates stamped into it. The object was signed by an end entity, an EE certificate, and all certificates in X509 have a start date and an end date. So the start and end date time of the EE certificate defines the validity it has signing over the object. There is an associated manifest, and it has a published time and a renew time. There is a CRL, and it has a published time and a renew time. And all of these things, manifest, CRL, and EE certificate, are in turn signed by a CA certificate that has a start time and an end time. So there's quite a lot of places that the validity interval can come from. And at some level, what you're saying is the shortest of any of those seems to be variable across the system. And the answer is yes, they are. So first of all RIRs, we all have a policy separation here. The decision about what lifetime we put in certificates that we give people under our signing process is different in each RIR. In APNIC, and I can't speak for the decision the other RIRs made, but in APNIC, it is strongly related to the validity of your membership. And so the life cycle of your membership renewal, you joined in winter, your certificate life will be a validity interval through to the next winter. You joined in summer, it's through to the next summer. It's bounded by your validity as a member. In fact, if you take one of our discounting options and prepay multi-year, your validity becomes multi-year. So what really matters here is if you go non-member, if you do not renew your membership status. And so what we do is we have a padding interval in which we retain you beyond the end of that membership, but we then put you into a suspended state. And we have made a commitment that we will renew all of your products, even though you can't log in because you're suspended. And it's only when your account is terminated, and we hope you don't terminate, but if it is terminated, that's when we cease to publish. So here are some things that could happen. We could deprecate that cert by CRLing it, but that would mean we actively said, stop it. If we simply leave things as they are, then through no positive action to deprecate, the certificate has an end of life. And it means without having to do a thing, it's going to end if you don't enter the renewal state. And that process actually encompasses what happens in ROAs. We run an intermediate system where you tell us what you would like your routing state to be, and we make a commitment. We're going to renew that as long as the certification state behind you is valid. And your lifetime of the ROA is a function of when you made it and what the aging of your parent certificate is, and the forward lead time before we need to renew it. And it varies by product, depending on your certification state. But I can tell you that the duty cycle that reissues the manifest and the CRL is generally in a very short time frame. It's in a 2-day cycle. So although we publish things that might say, I'm valid for a year, we're actually going to renew the declaration of state almost every day against that. So we can, if you say to us, I want to repudiate a thing, we can CRL it, but it'll be at a shorter life than the visible life of the object. And that's the nature of the system. Sorry, Aftab, I know that's a complicated answer, but it's a complicated system.
Well, the thing is, it's a complicated system, as you said. And the thing is, we are trying to bring the whole membership onto this system. It's better for them to understand how complicated it is.
So I want to put to you the obvious simplification. Why don't we renew every rower on a Monday at 7 a.m.? Okay, imagine the behaviors of this system. Every operator worldwide pulsing at the time of Brisbane 7 a.m. because that's the republication event. Imagine things break. Every operator dropping off its validity state at 7 a.m. on Brisbane time. I actually think it's better that there's a reasoned distribution in date and time for the variance of all of these things. It reduces the likelihood of synchronized systems failure.
I absolutely agree. The only question is these numbers should be, as I mentioned earlier, these numbers should be transparently available to every operator. When they create a ROA, they should know when, where, and how. What is the timeline, and when this will appear, when it will just disappear because of X, Y, Z reason. So, I mean, the second point, I'm just heading towards Taiji-san. So, Taiji-san, you've been part of the APNIC RPKI team. So, how you are implementing this time cycle? When do you create a ROA? You're following the same as the APNIC, or you set your own timelines?
Thank you. Hi. Actually, the duration for the resource certificate and ROA are not so discussive things. The actual thing is that manifest and CRL. We reported, I think 2 years before, we failed to keep longer, we keep the signing system longer than the manifest and the CRL expiration date. So it makes our operational cycles when we have the large trouble, but we need to repair until the expiration time. So such kind of design is put it on the living data, but about the certificate and CRL, I just considering about the data size, it should be related to the size of the CRL. If anyone observed the size of CRL, if you have the longer time durations, it should be larger, and the user need to download. So
yes, that was actually discussed in the early design phases, and we were given recommendations to make sure that if we were aware all of the certificates in the first 20,000 CRL states had expired because of end of life, they can be removed from the CRL, and you simply carry on with the things that have to be existing in a CRL because they still would exist if they were not repudiated. So policing CRLs was an issue in design. And because our PKI, unlike most PKIs, has huge amounts of churn, new certificates are made with ephemeral keys all the time, there is potential for our system to generate huge CRLs. So Taiji has gone to an important point. We need to think about this.
Good. That's really good. So GJM, if you can shed some light at how other NIRs are doing this, if you're aware of that.
I'm not aware that there's been significant tuning in the NIRs. I know that TWNIC had operational duty cycle concerns and altered some of their validity and operating intervals to make sure that they could complete a cycle without too much churn. Only one of the NIRs is using krill. The other three are using variant releases of the Python software from Dragon Research. And so they will tend to a collected similarity in operation unless they deliberately tune otherwise. Krill has a 10-minute duty cycle for attempting refresh into the parent, and it's possible some object states are seen to vary on a 10-minute cycle. So without altering its tuning, we may be generating a lot of change of state that isn't reflective of actual change, purposeful change that we're making into the system. I see Geoff has his hand up.
Yep.
On that subject of CRLs, part of the issue is Are we designing for the current system, or are we designing more generically? In this sort of separated repository distribution model, the size of the CRLs is actually not a really big issue, because all of that checking, and particularly revocation list checking, happens offline, and it happens inside normal duty cycles. So I wouldn't say make them a gig in size, but if they were a gig, you know, it really wouldn't matter, right? But you're imposing a use model on a generic tool, and that's the issue. Because if we ever want to think about using this RPKI in a model that does on demand, for example, in where we use TLS, where you do the checking of the credentials in real time, then the issue is massive CRLs become a real problem. You either spend time checking the CRL online, or you have to bundle the CRL up in the exchange. And all of a sudden, that's when you pay. The result, like Let's Encrypt, says really short lifetimes, 90 days, to limit CRL sizes down to the absolute minimum. So short certificate times, constant reissuing flushes the CRLs. And that's really the design consideration in this system. You're tying certificate lifetime against CRL. Now, in the web, no one checks CRLs. So it's a really bad thing to rely on the CRL because no one checks. Oops. Here, we're kind of hoping folk are going to continue to rely on CRLs, but you can't be sure. And if you can't be sure, oddly enough, shorter certificate lifetimes give you a system that has a fail-safe where the exposed hole of a certificate that should have been or was revoked and no one's checking is quite small in time. So it's those design considerations that actually lead you into certificate lifetime, CRL size. That was all I had to comment. Thanks.
So, I mean, it's right now the lifetime of the certificate is not more than a year. In some cases, it is more than a year for those who are paying for multiple years. That's if I'm not mistaken, John?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
And when we make an EE certificate for an object, the EE certificate will have a 1-year life. So the actual object burnt with the EE encapsulated innately of itself says, I'm good for a year.
Yeah, and even if the account has been terminated, since you cannot go and delete the ROA, so that will die itself after a year.
No, because remember, it's a chain. If the account is terminated, a CRL in the chain of authority above that EE will invalidate. If you can't make a path to the trust anchor, that EE terminates. EEs are conditionally valid. You must have a chain to a trust anchor. If we've repudiated the cert in a CRL, it's not valid.
That's perfect.
The tension here, Aftab, is a tension between having a certificate that expresses the lifetime of a business relationship and having a system that we assume an internet all of the time. We assume that relying parties constantly refresh their state. If they do so, you can make certificate lifetime short. Let me go drastically and say 1 day, even though that's an insanely short amount of time.
Route optimizing equipment, route optimizers, Geoff, you might need to make it valid for 1 hour.
Well, okay. But my point is, in some ways, because you've got a constantly refreshed relationship and you don't expect folk to take a certificate and head off into the wild woods of non-internet land and keep on using it, because you're not expecting that, you actually don't need long lifetime certificates. What you want is a certificate lifetime to actually express an operational requirement, not a contractual business relationship. But that's the tension. You know, you're a member for the next year, even if you don't pay us any more money, says, well, I'll give you a certificate with 1 year. But the rest of the parameters of the system go, I'd really like to give it to you for a month and then refresh it and refresh it, because everyone's refreshing anyway. That's what we're assuming.
And a month period is, I think, more than enough. But yeah, I mean, if that's an operational issue, I will leave that with APNIC to make a decision on. But yeah, whatever the decision is, I think it's good to know that whatever the decision is.
And I think I have a burden here, which is we should be documenting this so much better. It should be available to people to understand what are the choices we've made, and we can have rational conversations. Are these the right choices for the modern network? And adjust them in the light of experience. So I've been taking some notes on a whiteboard here, and I'm thinking hard. We need to document this stuff, Aftab.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. So second point on the documentation side is the CPS,
Aha.
the certificate practice statement. I mean, you did mention on your quick overview that
Yep.
it was done like 10 years ago, right?
Yep.
And if folks are interested, the APNIC CA has a link. If you open up the APNIC CA, it has a link of the CPS.
Every single certificate we mint has the URL of a CPS.
So you can go and read that document. You can also—
Please don't.
Yes, it will give you a little bit of nightmare, but it will give you certain numbers. Yes.
Can I do my CPS wrap?
Absolutely, sir.
So the thing here is the CPS is a highly formalized structured document. It's an IETF standard. It's like the joke about IBM manuals that they used to come with blank pages that would say at the bottom, this page intentionally left blank. And you want to say, why is the page there? And the answer is because in a future revision, they know something's going to go there. The CPS is the same. It has bullet points for every possible situation. You might need to make a prescriptive statement of intent. And most of them in our CPS say not applicable. The thing is, we haven't been adequately addressing that document. It's over 10 years ago, and it refers to our old physical location and our old security model, and it predates 2FA, two-factor authentication in the clients, and it predates AS0. So things that materially relate to where we are and how we operate, and things that logistically relate to how you operate and how things are made in our RPKI system and what is made, it's out of date. So we have been involved in a rewrite in conjunction with the RIPE NCC, a collaborative activity. They have their lawyers, we have our lawyers, they have their people, we have our people. We've been looking at this and discussing, and we expect to complete this review really shortly. We're aiming for a completion of an initial public view very, very soon, probably towards the end of this month. And we're expecting closure of the CPS towards the middle of the year. And I think I'll be reporting on this in APNIC 52. Now, there's a legal component. You have to be very careful about the tortuous legal language. The party of the first part shall be known as the party of the first part. The party of the second part shall be known as the party of the second part. But there's also a logistical thing. How do we reflect the reality of how we operate this system? What words do we put into this CPS? Where's the right place to do these things? So that has to be done. But there is also the community part. We do put a URL of the CPS in every certificate we make, and it has to be publicly visible. And I actually think it's part of good community practice that you guys read it and reflect on it. So my joke about please don't look at it, it's really only because I know it's old. We actually do need you, all of you, to look at this document and to reflect on it and to help us. And I think the strong likelihood is that we will not wait 10 years for the next revision. It's much more likely to be revision in the light of significant change, but perhaps a review cycle that could be done here in the routing security SIG, perhaps every 2 years or every 4 years. We should invest in this document.
So just going on to the same point is, so is there any contractual obligation for the NIRs who are doing the RPKI themselves that they have to follow the same CPS, or they can come up with their own and say, nah, we're going to do this one?
No, I have a belief, although I'd have to really go and check on the background, but I have a belief it's an all-encompassing system. You inherit obligations. The entire community inherits obligations against this state. It's a declaration of intent that's meant to be encompassing. I could be wrong, and you really would need to ask that question properly when the thing surfaces. But my belief is we're not looking for variants of the CPS.
George, a CPS is an assertion by a CA as to why you should trust the products issued by that CA.
So in fact, it is only at the layer of you.
It's boxed by the CA. The other thing is the CPS isn't everything you do, and it's not a description of everything you do. But when you claim you do something in a CPS, in order for relying parties to trust you, you better bloody well do that. In other words, you cannot be caught lying in a CPS, because that's really bad, because that means no one can trust you.
It's a legal document.
Not quite. It's a contract between the CA and the user of those certificates. You're saying what you did to make this digital product, and the relying party, all those network operators, only have that CPS as the basis of why they should believe you. And so it's like an implicit contract here. But again, I stress it's not everything you do. It doesn't need to describe that you only open the HSM on a Monday, blah, blah, blah. But it does describe practices that anything that's described must be true. Because other than that, you are lying. And that's bad, because this whole thing is about trust, right?
So it's a balancing act between the minimum statements you need in it and overdoing it to make too many prescriptive binding obligations visible in it. Dee Mara has made a statement that I think is quite useful here in the chat window. Dee, do you want to speak to that?
Yes. Well, I would like to restate my point of view. So although the current CPS IFC just requires CA to publish CPS, but it doesn't impose no detailed content, leaving them to local policy as per different CA. So we don't want, and RPST2 can detect whether CA published its CPS, giving warning to user. So if many of CAs don't have more detail about CPS, RPST2 will issue warnings, which means at present, we'll get a huge number of warnings to immerse the real warning. So we currently turn down this function given this situation. So I hope in the coming future, the CPS mechanism could be formalized to make our relying party software to work well.
As a service to the community, back in April 2015, the IETF published RFC 7382, which is a template CPS for CAs in the RPKI. You don't have to use it. You can say whatever you want in a CPS. That's the basis of a PKI. If I don't like what you said in your CPS, I don't trust your certificates, full stop, right? I just don't trust you. If I don't like your practices, there's no reason why I should trust you. If you are a responsible CA, you should read that RFC carefully, look at your situation and your practices when you mint certificates, and work out your own version of that document that accurately reflects your undertakings as to why folks should trust you. So yes, there is a template. It was produced some years ago. It's your responsibility as a CA to, if you will, fill in the blanks with what you're doing and why you should be trusted.
And that template is the model we follow. And that is the thing that has many, many pages that we refer to as not applicable.
Taiji-san.
Thank you. I'm hoping I'm talking about the different level of the CPS. I think the CPS is a kind of communication tool between the user and the CA. And we as the committee or operator in AP region, we have two channels for users. One is the global users who access to our systems. They think what's the operational things in CAs in AP region. Another is between CA in AP region, I think. If the difference between the CA operation between the CA, the assumption on the RPKI is horrible things, becomes horrible thing. So it's not easy to choose the one answer for everyone, but we can discuss by using CPS between CAs, I think.
That's, I mean, I really like the statement that assumption in RPKI is very horrible. So, yeah, it's a good point, and I'm going to use that one. So just moving on to the next question is, which we discussed a little bit, is the reporting process, right? As this is what the transparency, let's say, in a nutshell, we are talking about. Registry was never supposed to be a 24/7 operational services provider, right? Now it has become. So rather than going into the legalities that how it is and why it is, but One of the suggestions which was posted by Job Snyder as well, that there should be maybe a status page, status.rpki.apnic.net, where if something goes wrong, if my ISP goes down, I can literally go to their status page and say, all right, okay, there is a outage in this area, even NBN, how horrible it is, but at least I can figure it out, something is wrong. Why can't we do the similar for the RPKI services? You are muted.
I'm not going to say we can't. I'm going to say that it's potential that these things would have high false error rates and not reflect the operational requirements. But I'm certainly taking it on board. I wrote a note and I'll discuss this. The thing that you probably need to know is that there's kind of two aspects to this problem. One part is we absolutely do run monitoring and have on-call, and we have for an extremely long time. As long as I've been at APNIC, there's been an obligation to keep things working. We know it's a 24/7 network. So it's not, we don't operate 24/7. The problem is we don't operate an external community visible service 24/7. The parts that people externally interact with the Secretariat are core business hours with some extended hours. And then we have other channels, but we haven't yet made a binding commitment to an SLA around 24/7. But that is going to change, Aftab. It's quite obvious that we've moved into a different state of being. And I don't own that section of APNIC. That responsibility vests with other people. And I want to make sure I don't use the wrong language because I shouldn't commit other people structurally. But I'm very confident we're going to be making a public statement about visible service delivery on a 24/7 basis for these critical services. In the meantime, things like a status page, we certainly could talk about doing, and the KPI reporting work that we're doing internally and the improvements in systems monitoring play to the same place. We have contact points, knock at APNIC, help desk at APNIC, hostmaster at APNIC, and they are responsive, but for the time being, they aren't necessarily visibly responsive except for during extended office hours. But that is going to change.
Okay, I have two hands. One is Geoff, and then we have Sanjaya. Geoff.
Many of us have worked in operational environments outside of the RIRs where we had to do tight contracts for 7/24. And certainly that is not similar to the historical mode of operation of the RIRs. You needed spares at every major facility. You needed folk near aeroplanes to get them there if you needed to escalate beyond what's on site. A whole bunch of infrastructure. It is still an open issue for the RIR community and the network operations community as to how they want this service supported. Now, it's a given it wants 7/24. It's not an option to take the weekends off, absolutely. But it's an option to deliver using other folk who have expertise in 7/24. It's not necessarily that the entity that you understand as your operational RIR has to pedal every bicycle, thread every gear, do every last thing. And in exploring how best to provide service at that consistently absolute level of being available and operating all the time and having the wherewithal to fix problems from busted machines to floods to electricity outage to major geological hazards. All those kinds of things happen in this kind of service when you're looking at a global system. Now, it could be that the RIRs gear themselves up. That's certainly an option. It could be that we contract others to provide that level of frontline capability, not just give us a call, but we'll fix it. We will fix it because we're empowered. So yes, we're going to explore those options. We understand, I think, that once you get into routing, that's a much bigger issue than addressing registration. And the community, I suppose, also need to understand that this isn't cheap. Obviously, money has to be spent, but whether it's the RIRs themselves being the delivery mechanism and the logistics, etc., or we other folk get to help us in this endeavour is certainly an open question right now. But the commitment to actually do this well, I think you've got to count on. We do understand that commitment. Sanjaya might
Perfect.
well
I mean,
add
I
to
would just want to add that membership is not cheap as well. So yeah.
Totally. You know, there's no such thing as a free lunch here, Aftab. Absolutely.
Absolutely. So I mean, I think members. I mean, being a paid member, I do expect certain level of services. And I mean, APNIC has done an amazing job so far. Other RIRs had issues, but APNIC has done perfect job, I think. But we can do much better than that. So Sanjay.
Thanks, Aftab. Hi, everyone. Yes, so tomorrow when we announce our activity plan, 2021 activity plan, you should see the 24/7 capabilities that we intend to deploy this year. So we will do that part for sure. But I'm also echoing Geoff here that this is a work that could be collaboratively done by the operators as well. And we just need to, after the APNIC meeting, we're going to meet and really look at the RPKI architecture and see which one can we replicate with others, which one is our responsibility, and so on, and try to map it out and then work together with everyone to make RPKI more reliable.
Okay, that's really good to hear. So yeah, thank you so much for the update. I'm looking forward to a more detailed update tomorrow. So going to the last question of this discussion point is, so we do, I mean, there is a model of hosted CA, right? So NIRs are one example of that, but any member can do hosted CA as well. So in terms of that,
self-hosted, anyone can take delegation and operate their own CA inside their own infrastructure.
Yeah, so whatever we have discussed so far, how does it impact a self-hosted CA solution? And when you allow a member or even an NIR, when you as an APNIC, is there any legal binding or a understanding of an SLA saying, okay, you have to maintain this level of service, otherwise XYZ?
So in terms of formalisms, do we make that binding requirement on people? No, we didn't adopt that. It's a protocol binding, and the protocol entry point is available 24/7 in us. The duty cycle that you operate at is a configuration parameter in your software system. In the case of Krill, it's a 10-minute poll. Now, I want to move to one side and then come back. We didn't design the protocol across this boundary to have the parents say, hey, child, I need to tell you something. We sit there silently twiddling our thumbs until the child says, do you have anything to tell me? So this system has no notify. It's based on clients polling. That 10-minute poll that Krill is implementing, you could tune it down to a minute or up to a day. But it's actually critically important it happens, because it's the only way changes in certification state that you could apply are going to be communicated to you by how frequently you ask up and down across that boundary. So to come back, no, we don't do a strong statement, you must meet an SLA across this boundary. And it's an interesting question. Should we? Should there be a stated, explicit expectation of a minimum cycle time in order to do this? And I can take different views. For the NIRs, I think there's a model that says you are in many, many senses in this functional game acting as agents of what APNIC does. And so your boundary of public commitment might have to be closer to ours. But when you move to a member who is talking about running certification for the addresses they have delegated and they have no transitive delegation to any other party, I really think it's their decision. If Telstra made a decision they want to operate this thing once a day, I'm not sure I'm in a position to require them to operate it once a minute. I think it isn't subject to an SLA boundary. But nonetheless...
But it can be a recommendation, right?
It could, but that's less SLA-like and more recommended practice-like. That's more manners-y. What's the expectation? So there's that. So the next thing is, Separately, we modified our systems last year so that when a hostmaster says you have a new address, the time between that happening in registry and that becoming visible in RPKI, we reduced that window to a 5-minute window. And we believe, on the basis that the operating cycle is a 10-minute cycle, the most likely outcome, even for delegated CAs, is basically immediate. They get the resource visibility as soon as it's in the system. So the ability to add and withdraw, to announce and decline rowers against changes in the parent, we think is in the 5 to 10 minute window boundary. But it is within the control of the delegate to decide what frequency they operate on. So there is a second part of the problem, because that's the engine that's making things. How about the service of publishing things, the repository? So there is a choice when you are delegated. Do you publish inside yourself or do you publish somewhere else? And that somewhere else is making use of a thing called publication service. And publication service has two models: publish in your parent, so use the one directly above you, or publish in some third party. Now, the third party publishing thing doesn't currently exist, but we have had communication from cloud providers, from intermediaries in general service delivery, from major ISPs, from Google, Cloudflare, these kinds of people to say, why don't we operate publication service? And there are many attractive qualities in this. The likelihood is the delivery reliability will go up 2 or 3 orders of magnitude, and the RTT will shrink down to the boundary of RTT to that provider's footprint. And it could be industry neutral, and it's of general community benefit. So I am very attracted to this. But the thing is, that service doesn't currently exist as an offer of service. What we have is publish and parent. So APNIC is going to the cloud in our publication methodology. That's in the roadmap through to 2022. And I would encourage anyone who is self-hosting, please publish in parent, because unless you are a super large entity, the likelihood is that we will have a higher availability than you if you're singly honed. But although I say that, Aftab, I did say the 4 agencies that currently are children under APNIC, apart from research, all of them are children of multiple RIRs. And it is possible that this is a statement: the best place for them to publish is not us. It may be self-publishing or publish in a neutral third party is definitely a better model. So that has to be understood. The NIR, it's really no different. Currently, they all self-publish. We monitor them. We're looking at this. We're thinking about opportunities to improve alerting and notification. And it does go to the question of availability and reliability. And we expect to bring reporting on visibility of NIR service into the community to match the reporting that we do for RPKI here.
Okay, so thank you so much. That's the last cycle of the question, Geoff, and then Tashi.
Look, I'll be really quick here. No one wants to have their operational service dependent on third parties. It gives you this uncomfortable feeling of being vulnerable for issues that you can't control. And you speak to any of the players from small to big. If they're critical, third-party dependencies are evil. Eliminate the lot. Self-publish, absolutely. Why? Because I have direct control. I'm not reliant on something I can't control. So, you know, I understand what people want, and there is a strong push to fold all this into your own operational envelope. Absolutely. But be aware of a few things. Currently, every single relying party polls every single publication point every 600 seconds. There are 60,000 odd ASs out there. Let's assume that they're doing 10-minute polling. And we're all doing web-based polling. So you've got to handle 60,000 web requests that might take some time. They're a long way away, long latency. Every 10 minutes is continuous throughput. Because the other thing is there's head of line blocking. It's actually a DDoS attack if you publish a site that has all these certificates and you're running like molasses. So once you take that decision, you have an obligation to everyone else to have capacity, throughput, and speed, which sort of says you really should be using a CDN to make this faster for your fellow operator, because single points are difficult in that respect. So pros and cons about doing it yourself and outsourcing it, absolutely. But, make your choices carefully. It's your network that's on the line here. And like I said, I can truly appreciate going, fold it in, but at the same time, you're not doing it for your own basis. You're publishing this information for everybody else. What's the most effective way to keep that information permanently available for folk who are going to sweep your site, all 60,000 of them in theory, every 10 minutes? And that's a big sweep. Really good site in Wikimedia. They self-publish and they actually track the amount of time it takes to sweep through all of everyone's publication points. And they log everybody's performance in the one graph. I'm not sure how long this will last as we all self-publish, but they name the guilty. The slow people are named, and it's interesting reading. So that's Wikimedia. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Tashi. Tashi. You are unmute. You can speak.
All right. Now I can speak. Along the lines of what Geoff said, this is a big responsibility. Whoever is part of the framework needs to factor in what Geoff just said. It's not just me being in the chain, it's also all the extra responsibilities that come with it, availability, resiliency. So as consumers of RPKI and as proponents out there encouraging folks to do RPKI, my question to all the organizations in the chain of trust is, do we need some form of a compliance or a SLA sheet where anyone who wants to be a part, you need to at least fulfill certain technical requirements in terms of resiliency, manpower, and all the other resiliency features? Because we have seen, without naming names, we have seen outages. And the root cause analysis seems to be, this failed. But yes, nice to see that failed, but why wasn't there a backup for that? Why wasn't there alternate resiliency features or high availability features for that? So speaking purely as a consumer of RPKI, not as a APNIC staff, would like the routing SIG to take this up and make the framework a bit resilient and parties involved in the framework to be conscious of that extra responsibility. Because if you're doing it only for your resource, fine, only you are unreachable. But when you're doing it for a big address range, all of those address range and networks that use that space gets affected. So after, I have to jump to the next session after. Thanks a lot.
I can see Sunny as well, so I have to.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for your comment. So on that note, I would like to wrap up the discussion point, and we would like to move to the last agenda item, which is the RPKI Viz presentation from Dima, and that is Sunny has a cup in front of him. Okay, so
sorry, After we don't really have time. We have to wind this up and start the other session. We only have 5 minutes.
Okay, so we only have 5 minutes. We can't do it.
5 minutes. We only have 5 minutes for my team here to wind this one up and go to the other section.
Okay, I mean, then my apologies to Dr. Dima, but we will make sure that the presentation is available on the site. So Rupesh, last 1 minute for the wrap up.
Okay, thank you everyone. Dima, okay, you can speak up.
Okay. So I did not realize the time has passed so quickly. So good morning, everyone. I'm Dima from ZDS. Today, with my routing security SIG crucial head off, I'm honored to take this opportunity to brief an online tool for detecting and diagnosing RPK per inside data and misconfigurations.
Dima, I think as after that, we probably might not have time for the presentation. So what we'll do is we'll put the presentation on the online and then share it on the mailing list as well. I think Sunny has another program that's lined up. So we really apologize. We might need to wrap up this session.
Pardon?
Yes, I think what Sunny was saying, that we have to wrap up right now. So we really don't have time for this presentation. So we will try to do it in a standalone session some other time.
Yeah, please upload the slides so we can publish it on the website. Yeah.
Sure, Sunny.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for participating in this routing security SIG. It was an interesting presentation. Thanks to all the presenters, George, Taiji-san and Aftab for your presentation. Really interesting presentations. A lot of good questions has come up as well, and we'll make sure that I think the chairs will also be compiling all the feedbacks that's come across in this this session, and we'll be presenting it in tomorrow's AGM or AMM second session, first session. I think was it? It's before lunch, so please do attend that as well. And thank you very much for all the presenters, all the participants, and we request everyone to be actively participating in mailing list also, routing security mailing list. You can go to the APNIC website and see the mailing list if you have not yet attended, subscribed yet. Thank you very much. I really do apologize for the time limitations that we have, and then I'm sure there are a lot of good questions and more questions which we can further discuss on the mailing list as well. Thank you. Over to you, Sunny. Thank you very much, everyone. And thank you, Aftab Siddiqui, for chairing this session, and excellent work as the chair of routing security. Thank you.
Thanks, Rupesh. Well, you thanked everyone, so I just say what you said. Thanks everyone for the great participation. That's a beautiful, really good agenda. Maybe in future you may need you may need 2 sessions for this SIG. And I hope you continue this discussion on the mailing list in preparation for the APNIC 52. Thank you so much. And we really don't have a time to take break here, but we will switch over to the other session as soon as we can. Thank you.
Thank you.